folks, do you remember way back in 1968 when former Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau had this famous quotation, namely, quote, "There is no place for the state in the bedroom of the nation," end quote. Well, folks, that was then and this is now, because under Prime Minister Blackface, the state is very, very interested in what's going on in your bedroom. And yes, we have the evidence. Joining me right now is Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And Franco, you've done it again, your organization. You've gone into the records of the federal bureaucracy, and you have discovered that the government is now funding, I think it's called senior sex story shows. Franco, what in the world do you mean by that?
Okay, so we're not only funding senior sex story shows, we're outsourcing seniors sex story shows. Like, we are funding these sex story shows around the world in places like Australia, Austria, and Taiwan. So we found through an access to information request that the government of Canada has spent more than $12,000 paying for these live performances where seniors in other countries get on stage and relive their sexual histories to a live audience, talking about the first, the last, the best, the worst sexual experiences they've ever had. Now, you know, when parents tell their children to listen to their elders, I don't think this is what they had in mind.
Oh, please, I scare easy. But Franco, what in the world is the ostensible policy reason for this in the first place?
Yeah, I'd love to sit down with the bureaucrats when they're in this room deciding, what should we do with all this taxpayer money? I'd love to sit down with those bureaucrats who said, yep, funding senior sex story shows abroad is a good use of taxpayers' money. I kid. Of course, this is an awful use of our tax dollars, but this is funded through what's called the Mission Cultural Fund. It's a little-known slush fund that Global Affairs Canada has, and the policy objectives are supposed to be to promote Canada abroad and to push forward Canada's foreign policy. Well, the obvious question is this: how is paying for these sex story shows in other countries promoting Canada?
Wow, the Mission Cultural Fund. I'm sure there's a punchline there involving the term the missionary position, but I dare not go there. But Franco, this to me is perverse. I mean, look what Canadians are dealing with right now. Inflation, interest rates going through the roof, this continual attack on our freedoms via censorship. And somehow, some way, some bureaucrat with some bureaucracy said, no, we got to get this senior sex story initiative going. Who asked for this in the first place?
Well, what would be a better use of taxpayers' money? Paying seniors to talk about anything else. Literally anything else. I mean, look, here's a novel idea. Maybe the government gives it a break on the sex shows until it pays down its $1 trillion debt. And when I say sex shows, I do mean plural, because we also discovered that through this Mission Cultural Fund, previously, it spent about $8,800 on a sex toy show in Germany. Okay, now call me old-fashioned, but if the Germans want to have sex toy shows, maybe they can fund it with their own money and not rely on Canadian taxpayers.
Yeah, no, I guess you're an old-fashioned square then, Franco. But, as you mentioned, trips to Vienna, Austria, Melbourne, Taipei City, Taiwan. As they say, the bottom line is the bottom line. How much went into this nonsense, Franco?
About $12,500. Okay, so first of all, I mean, no taxpayers' money should be going to fund live performances of seniors in other countries reliving their sex lives. I can't believe I have to say that out loud with my mouth, but there is no way that Canadian taxpayers should be funding that. I mean, come on, right? But look, this is such a waste of money. This whole Mission Cultural Fund should be scrapped completely. It's always going over budget. Let me just give you some other examples of what has been used through this funding. The government spent like $51,000 for a Bryan Adams, yes, that Bryan Adams, to have a red carpet photo exhibit. The government spent $15,000 through the Mission Cultural Fund to promote the famous cartoonist Lynn Johnston's work in Washington. And it also spent nearly $10,000 to promote Margaret Atwood, the famous author, to promote her book in Australia. So this Mission Cultural Fund, what it really smells like to me is just you have these bureaucrats who have way too much of taxpayers' money on their hands and are just looking to spend money, right? Because none of these things that the Mission Cultural Fund is spending money on, of the list that I just said, none of this should be a priority for Canadian taxpayers.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.